In some ways, the Pharisees in today's gospel remind me of my 16-year-old self. I'm reminded specifically of conversations with my mother regarding the completely ridiculous curfew that I was forced to endure through most of my time in high school. My efforts to negotiate were mostly futile, but that did not stop me from trying time and time again. The conversations always started with some variation of the question, why do I have to be home so early? I was not really asking with an openness to an answer that justified her decision. Like the Pharisees, I was ready to attack her answer before I even asked the question. Unfortunately, for 16-year-old me, my mother navigates these situations almost as well as Jesus does. In this story from Matthew, Jesus ends a series of careful attack and well-worded rebuttal with the religious leaders of his time. Mark and Luke describe the same story in their Gospels with significantly less edge. Sometimes it's easy for me to favor the versions in the other Gospels over the tension depicted in Matthew's version. Matthew makes me uncomfortable a lot. He frequently depicts stories in which one group is clearly good and the other is clearly bad or wrong. I like dynamic characters in my stories. His are layered with accusation. I'm a firm believer that everyone has good inside of them, and I rarely like to look at things as black and white because I see possibility in gray areas. But here we have it. A very uncomfortable confrontation that results in a clear and beautiful call. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is not new information. Jesus reminds the Pharisees and us of laws that were verbalized in the Old Testament. This is something that they would have agreed with because despite the tension and constant attacks, Jesus and the Pharisees came from the same tradition. They disagree, but they disagree over the interpretation of common beliefs. I think that's something we struggle with today. There are many times that I've disagreed with other Christians. Many times that I've felt like I was 100% right and they were so wrong. I can think of many conversations in which I asked questions already prepared to attack the answer before I even heard it. In these situations, I'm like the Pharisees. In these situations, I'm most in need of the reminder that Jesus gives them and that he gives us. Love God. Love each other. But how do we do that? How do we love the Lord our God with all our hearts and our minds and our souls? How do we love our neighbors as ourselves? These things are hard on good days. They are hard to do when we see good in those around us, when we do not see ourselves as 100% correct and others as 100% wrong. This kind of love is even harder in a world that often looks and feels like Matthew's depiction of the gospel. How do we love God fully and love our neighbors as ourselves in the tense, violent world that we live in? I am comforted and challenged by the fact that love looks different for everyone. God made us all to be different, so naturally the way that we love will be different. If we had a to-do list for how to love, no two would be exactly the same, and each list would change constantly as situations and people change. In thinking about my high school Pharisee days, I took a very long, bittersweet trip down memory lane. I was reminded of so many fun times with of friends, many of which happened in the same location. Richard and William Bird are two brothers a year apart who grew up in my neighborhood. From ninth grade until graduation, I may have clocked more waking hours in their house than I did in my own. And I was not alone in this. A group of maybe 10 of us regularly graced the Birds with our sometimes invited presence. Despite the loud voices, extra messes, and a grocery bill that had to have been 5 times what it should have been, Mr. and Mrs. Bird were always welcoming. They often encouraged us to come over. And I think this was one of Mrs. Bird's unique ways of loving her boys and loving their friends. She let us come to her house because, to be honest, she really couldn't leave that much. Joanna Bird had a double lung and heart transplant when the boys were 1 and 2 years old. She did remarkably well, living for 22 years after her transplant, but I'm sure it was really hard to keep up with 2 active sons as they grew. She had a body that was not up for high energy activity. For years, Mrs. Bird would wake up from naps to cook for us. She was eager to discuss her favorite television shows, celebrity news, or latest eBay purchase. We told her about football games, school dances, and how our classes were going. She tolerated our loud music, messiness, and cannonball splashes as we jumped from their roof to their pool. She may not have been there for every sporting event, speech and debate tournament, or pep rally that William or Richard were a part of, but she invited her boys and her friends to come to her. She loved with her whole heart in the way that she was able to. My friends, Christina and Mimi, loved me as themselves in a really fun way. We all went to college together, and it was my 20th birthday. I was going through a really hard time, and I was not in a celebratory mood. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep, they made sure I was doing something fun. We went to the pool, we got ready for dinner as a group, we went to my favorite restaurant in town. They got my other friends together and made sure I had a big group to celebrate my birthday. There was even a birthday crown involved, and if you know me well, you know I love that kind of attention. They never said it, but I know they did this with intentional precision. They wanted to make my day special despite the situation that I was in. There were plenty of other things that they could and probably should have been doing as college students, but they took a whole day and whatever amount of time it took to plan to celebrate me and to make me feel special. They didn't even acknowledge all of the work or time that went into this, and to be honest, I don't think I did either. They just loved me the best way that they knew how, and it was perfect. At St. Mark's, you all love God and one another in ways too. I'm constantly inspired by the way you look out for one another, by the time and energy you devote to this parish, and by what a community of this size is able to do in the world. You pay for a whole school full of children in Haiti to eat lunch every day. You pray for those who are sick or in need with constant discipline and compassion. You celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and accomplishments as if they were your own. You do not settle because something is good. You strive for the best community that you can be because that is loving God with your whole heart and soul and mind. You have a really healthy children, youth, and family program, but you saw potential for growth and for more, and so you invested in a full-time position because you wanted that ministry to be the best that it could possibly be. Some of the biggest supporters and advocates for this growth don't even have children in the program. That is loving your neighbor as yourself. And here we are in the midst of the season of gratitude. We get to celebrate this wonderful community and all of the ways that we're thankful for it. In the coming weeks, that tree will be filled full of leaves representing the awesome things that we are all grateful for. We'll continue to hear from members of the community as they share their thoughts on the gospel. This is my first season of gratitude at St. Mark's, and I'm so excited for Consecration Sunday. It's our opportunity to celebrate our successes, to get excited about the future, and to commit to this community in such a tangible and vital way. I can't wait to see the generosity that flows from the same people who take on feeding a school full of children that they don't even know.